What's happening right now in the UK, Europe, and the US car industry? It feels almost like Carmageddon. For more than a century, European cars defined excellence. BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Volkswagen. These weren't just brands, they were status symbols around the world. If you wanted the best, you bought European, simple as that. But today, that story is falling apart. The very companies that invented the modern car are now at risk of losing the car business altogether. And shockingly, the threat isn't coming from Detroit or Tokyo. It's coming from China. Europe made one of the costliest mistakes in modern business, a €500 billion miscalculation. The numbers are brutal, the stakes are massive, and time is running out. To understand Europe's crisis, you need to look at the data. In the first 7 months of 2025, EU car sales dropped by 0.7%. That might sound small, but think of it like Netflix losing subscribers at the peak of streaming. Since 2019, Western Europe has lost 2.5 million car sales every year. That's the equivalent of erasing the entire Spanish car market annually. In just the first half of 2025, Europe sold 1.56 million fewer cars than in 2019, a period when sales should have been booming. Why? Because the global auto industry isn't shrinking, it's transforming. Electric and hybrid vehicles now make up 60% of all European sales, which is up from 51% just a year earlier. Germany's electric market jumped 38%. Belgium grew 17% and the Netherlands added 6%. The message is clear. Consumers want electric. But here's the twist. European automakers aren't the ones profiting. In just 6 months, Chinese companies doubled their market share across Europe. BYD, barely known 5 years ago, sold over 70,000 cars in half a year. That's a 311% increase. Europe's auto giants are, honestly, watching the ground disappear beneath their feet. European leaders thought they had a master plan. By banning gas-powered cars by 2035, they believed they'd force the world into the electric age, with European companies leading the way. On paper, it was genius. Automakers would either transition to zero-emission vehicles or pay massive penalties. But in 2025, that dream is colliding with reality. Mercedes CEO Ola Källenius recently called for a, reality check. He warns the ICE ban simply isn't practical. Not yet. Weak demand, sky-high costs, a charging network that's nowhere near ready. And now, even German automakers and their trade unions, usually enemies, are joining forces. They're urging Brussels to delay or ease the 2035 ban. But they're not the only voices in this debate. Over 150 leaders across Europe's electric ecosystem, from battery manufacturers to charging firms, are fighting back. They argue that Europe must not back down. Any hesitation, they say, would frighten investors and hand China an even bigger lead. It's turned into a tug-of-war between regulation and survival. On one side, automakers drowning in fines. On the other, policymakers demanding a cleaner future. The ambition is genuine. But the execution? It wasn't backed by the infrastructure, supply chains, or cost control needed to win. The real enemy of Europe's car industry isn't China, it's cost. Every part of the European system bleeds money. Outdated factories, high labor costs, strict union deals, soaring energy prices. Europe has built the most expensive car-making system in the world. Here's the shocking part. BYD can build an electric car in Europe for around €25,000. That's already 25% more than building the same model in China, but still €10,000 cheaper than what most European automakers can achieve. That's not a gap, it's a canyon. Meanwhile, the average price of a new car in Germany has hit €56,700. France, Italy, and Spain aren't far behind. Beautiful cars? Yes. But if customers can't afford them, the market collapses. Factories built for the old world now sit half empty. Suppliers face impossible choices: upgrade at enormous cost, move abroad, or close shop. Europe still relies on imported lithium-ion batteries, leaving it at the mercy of global price swings. Legacy costs are crushing the system, while China's newcomers run lean, modern, and debt-free. Chinese automakers didn't just enter Europe, they rewrote the rules. In early 2025, their market share nearly doubled. BYD's registration soared over 300%. And their advantage isn't cheap labor, it's a vertically integrated supply chain. Take CATL, one of China's battery powerhouses. They're building a factory in Hungary capable of producing 100 gigawatt-hours per year, enough to power millions of cars. And they're not just serving Chinese brands. They'll supply anyone. That means Europe's most crucial component, the battery, is now in foreign hands. But it goes even deeper. Chinese companies are building entire factories in Hungary and Turkey. Once production is local, tariffs disappear, logistics costs drop, and suddenly, they're not outsiders anymore. They're domestic manufacturers, and they're planning for the future. BYD and others are preparing to launch luxury brands by 2027, taking direct aim at Mercedes, BMW, and Audi on their own turf. Logistics costs fall, and suddenly, these companies stop appearing as foreign challengers and start blending in as local manufacturers. But here's the real twist. They're already planning for the next era. BYD and other Chinese automakers are set to roll out luxury brands by 2027. They're building their own charging stations, service centers, and full ecosystems. They're not in this for quick wins. They're positioning to dominate the long game. Europe invented the premium car model. China studied it, replicated it, and is now scaling it. Faster, cheaper, and in some cases, better. Europe believed tariffs could shield its industry. In 2025, the EU slapped duties ranging from 17 to 38% on Chinese electric cars, plus an existing 10% import tax. That means some models now face nearly 50% in extra costs. On paper, it sounds like a strong defense. In reality, it's a boomerang. Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares revealed the uncomfortable truth. These tariffs are actually pushing Chinese companies to set up shop inside Europe. Once their plants are built in Hungary, Poland, or Turkey, those tariffs disappear. And suddenly, European brands are competing with newer, more efficient factories right next door. Even with tariffs, many Chinese automakers remain profitable. Their supply chains are razor-sharp, their operations lean, and their costs so low that they can absorb the tariffs and still undercut local competitors. To make matters worse, Chinese firms are doubling down on hybrids, which face lower tariffs than fully electric vehicles. Meanwhile, Europe's automotive icons, Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW, Stellantis, are trapped. They depend heavily on China for both manufacturing and sales. They can't afford a trade war, but they can't win under the current system either. Tariffs were supposed to be Europe's safety net. Instead, they've deepened the hole. This crisis isn't theoretical anymore. It's real, and it's here. Across Europe, car plants are shutting down. Volkswagen has put its Brussels site up for sale. Stellantis, Valeo, and Bosch are freezing operations or closing older facilities, especially those tied to outdated combustion engine production. Suppliers are falling one after another. Over 60% say they face the same fatal mix: high costs, too much capacity, and too little demand. These aren't future warnings, they're current realities. Families in Germany, France, Italy, and the UK who have built cars for generations are suddenly jobless. Europe's car industry isn't just an industry. It's the backbone of economies. Germany's prosperity runs on automobiles. Millions of jobs, billions in tax revenue, and entire regions depend on it. If Europe loses the car business, it doesn't just lose prestige. It risks a full-scale economic earthquake. There are a few flickers of hope. Volkswagen is pushing budget EVs around 25,000 euros. Renault is experimenting with cheaper battery tech. BMW is betting on ultra-premium innovation. But these feel more like defense moves than breakthroughs. Small steps in a race China is already sprinting through. What comes next? Is this the end of Europe's reign over the car world? Not yet, but the clock is ticking. Europe still has what matters most: top engineering talent, world-class brands, and unmatched heritage. What it lacks is time and unity. If Europe can slash production costs, build its own battery supply chain, and massively expand its charging networks, it still stands a chance. But that will require governments, automakers, and unions to cooperate like never before. Otherwise, the crown of the auto world will quietly slide toward China. This isn't just about cars. It's about who owns the future of mobility, who sets the global standards, who creates the jobs, and who leads the next industrial era. The next decade will decide whether Europe remains a car superpower or becomes a cautionary tale about how giants fall. Europe once ruled the roads. Its cars weren't just machines. They were icons of status, design, and power. But today, those same legends face their greatest test yet. The data is brutal, the competition relentless, and the past mistakes impossible to ignore. Europe built the foundation for the electric revolution, but forgot to protect its own builders. Now, Chinese automakers are stepping into the spotlight. The choice is simple: evolve fast or lose the throne. The future of millions of workers and of Europe's economic identity hangs in the balance. The car game isn't over yet, but Europe's time to turn things around is running out.